Before we dive into the story, comment below. Your name, your city, your country, your local time. We love knowing where our listeners are from across the galaxy. He didn't plan on surviving the war. That wasn't the mission. His unit had been outnumbered for weeks. Supplies shredded and high command had gone dark. By the time Corporal Ryan Locke crawled out from the collapsed bunker, his entire platoon had been reduced to ghost signals. He expected to die with the radio static. But then he heard whimpering. Not human, not hostile, and not alone. Beneath the warped wreckage of an enemy transport, two small, trembling alien figures blinked up at him, fur singed, limbs quivering, eyes impossibly round. They weren't soldiers. They were children, not human, but clearly terrified and starving. He should have walked away. Protocol said leave them, but Ryan had already buried too many innocents on this rock. Instead, he sat down, opened his last protein bar, broke it in 3, and offered them the bigger halves. At first, they hesitated, staring at him like he might strike. But hunger won, and something else bloomed in that silent exchange. Trust. The smallest one purred, not like a cat, not like anything Ryan had heard, but it vibrated deep into his chest. The other nudged closer and curled around his leg like he was some ancient protector from their stories. Ryan just blinked. What had he done? The ridge above them shimmered. He turned. His rifle rose on instinct. That's when he saw it. Tens of thousands of hovering lights, silhouettes of massive ships forming in the sky, like thunderclouds made of steel. He wasn't facing 2 orphans. He just fed the children of something else entirely. I am Adam from 11 Labs. I speak funny. The sky didn't crack. It boomed. Not with thunder, but with something deeper. An engine hum that made the ground tremble beneath Ryan's boots. He knelt instinctively, wrapping his arms around the 2 alien strays. They didn't flinch this time. In fact, the smaller one growled low, facing the ridge with the same instinctive protection Ryan had shown them. Figures descended. Not soldiers, not scouts, something ceremonial. Ryan's heart beat out of rhythm. He had no backup, no air support, no orders, and now he was caught in the center of what looked like a galactic funeral or a royal procession. He raised his hands slowly, not armed. I don't mean harm. One of the beings that descended wore a dark silver mantle that shimmered like oil under starlight. Its eyes locked with Ryan's, and it froze. Then its head dipped. The aliens behind it kneeled, and Ryan Locke, battle-scarred soldier of Earth's 77th Outer Unit, blinked dumbly as a planetary warforce bowed to him because he'd fed their cubs. He didn't know how long he stood there, but the silence was thick enough to crush lungs. The lead alien stepped forward. It didn't speak, not with sound, but something brushed his thoughts. An image, a memory, an emotion, gratitude, reverence, and grief. The strays pressed themselves tighter against Ryan's legs. "What are you?" he whispered, voice dry as the wind. The taller alien turned, lifting one of the cubs into its arms like a parent, reclaiming a child lost to chaos. The little one resisted at first, whimpering. Its claws latched onto Ryan's jacket, refusing to be pulled away. Then came the sound, a shriek from above, the kind of sound that made your stomach twist, that made every nerve in your body scream at you to run. Another ship, sleek, black and barbed like a predator, was descending rapidly, and it wasn't here for a reunion. Before Ryan could shout, the sky lit up. Streaks of plasma fire raced through the clouds, targeting the hostile ship before it could land. A blinding cascade of defensive fire from the fleet above dropped the threat like a dead bird. The impact cratered the Earth half a mile away. Ryan flinched, but the aliens didn't. The leader simply looked to the sky, then nodded. Security, protection, they were here for him. No, that wasn't right. Because of him, the smaller cub broke free of the adult's grip and returned to Ryan's side, growling at the smoking crater in the distance. Ryan couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Guess we're both strays now, huh?" The leader tilted its head. Then it pointed, not at the crater, but at Ryan's chest. Another emotion hit him through the mental link: loyalty. The link between them felt alive now, not like a translator, not like some machine. It was raw instinct, like a tether pulled from his gut to theirs. He didn't understand them in words, but the feelings were as loud as artillery. Trust, confusion, hope. One of the fleet's smaller crafts landed nearby, hovering just feet above the dirt. It opened with a hiss, and a platform descended. The same silver-robed leader gestured toward it, with surprising humility. Ryan blinked. It was inviting him. "You want me to go with you?" The cubs pressed closer to his legs again. One nipped gently at his boot like a pet begging to be picked up. Ryan exhaled. He looked at his wrist pad. No signal, no way to call Earth, and with 2 alien kids depending on him, a warship overhead, and a civilization watching him like a mythical figure. What was his choice? He stepped forward. As soon as his foot hit the platform, the deck shimmered. Not just in reflection, but in energy. The metal reformed slightly beneath him, adjusting to his size, posture. Wait, the tech was alive, more advanced than anything Earth had touched. The taller cub leapt aboard beside him, landing silently. The smaller one nestled against his thigh, as the ramp rose and sealed behind them. Inside, it was silent, eerily so. Not a word, not a whisper. But their eyes never left him. Suddenly, one of the side walls flickered and turned into a screen, showing an image of Ryan giving rations to the cubs just hours before. Another screen showed the same cubs in medical distress, then curled beside his coat. It was like a memory archive. They'd recorded everything, and now they were broadcasting it. Before he could ask why, the lead alien finally spoke, not aloud, but through the ship itself. Its voice was ancient, smooth, but heavy, like time itself had bent to allow him this moment. "You are no longer unknown." Ryan stiffened. Meaning what? The screen shifted again, to show a council room filled with hundreds of their kind, a round table, holograms, and in the center, Ryan's image. "You shared food. You protected children not of your kin. You did not posture. You shielded." The room flickered again. Earth's fleet, his fleet, hovering on the edge of the solar border, tense, confused, likely preparing for war. The voice added, "For this reason we de-escalated." Ryan's throat caught. "Because of me?" The ship didn't answer. Instead, it lowered its lights, dimmed the panels, and shifted direction, flying not away, but toward the mothership, with Ryan at the center of a diplomatic miracle he didn't ask for, and the cubs, still curled beside him like the galaxy made sense again. They watched him from the shadows of their cloaked landing skiff, twin pairs of eyes wide and unblinking. The human was laughing alone at a story his datapad had played on loop for the past hour. A joke told 1,000 times, still funny, still real to him. He wasn't wearing armor now. No, this soldier had stripped it off, left it stacked in a neat pile near the edge of the rocky outpost. The desert wind whispered through faded insignia and frayed patches. Beside him, 2 odd-looking creatures huddled together under the human's field jacket, devouring a second ration bar he'd wordlessly tossed them. They were still watching, still waiting, but something inside them had shifted. Because when the others, those who'd warned against contact, those who called the human race untamed apexes, saw this moment, they didn't know whether to fear it more or fall to their knees in reverence. The soldier was still scratching one behind the ear with a calloused finger. The smaller one gave a strange sound that on their planet translated to something between purr and battle cry. Neither made a move to run. Neither was afraid. They'd chosen him. Morning came hard. The binary suns burned low and wide on the horizon, casting shadows longer than expected. But the soldier didn't stir. He'd set up a thermal tent and had the 2 alien cubs wrapped in one of his emergency blankets. He was alert beneath it all, eyes blinking against HUD feeds from satellites, signals pinging off compromised stations. What he didn't expect was the faint whine of an inbound vessel, far larger than the tiny scout ship the 2 cubs had arrived in. It rumbled through the atmosphere like a god clearing its throat. The clouds themselves seemed to recoil. Within minutes, the sky was blotted out entirely, the sun eclipsed by a fleet of monstrous scale. The soldier stepped forward, boots grinding into grit, not out of pride or threat, but something closer to protection. The cubs stirred. The human reached behind his belt and unclipped nothing. He came to stand between the cubs and the ship's descending ramp with only the wind at his back. Every logical cell in his brain screamed retreat, but something older, something deeper, made his feet root to the ground. He wasn't just standing for them. He was standing with them. This is the part no analyst ever could have predicted, that a human's most terrifying weapon wouldn't be a rifle, or a drone, or even their biological resilience. It was loyalty, unreasoning, absolute, and often self-destructive loyalty. When the ramp of the great ship descended, a silence heavier than the ship's mass settled across the landscape. An entire war fleet hovered above, waiting on the decision of one. And the only being to step off that ramp was a mother, clad in golden black armor that shimmered with the heat of 100 stars. The matriarch of the predator race approached without guards, without fanfare, and without fear. Her eyes locked on the two cubs, and then unblinkingly to the human who blocked her path. She spoke in a language never translated by any known tech, but it wasn't the words the soldier heard. It was the grief, the desperation, the hope. He didn't flinch. He only stepped aside after reaching down, gently to place one hand on each cub and guide them forward. They ran to her, and the mother fell to her knees. There's a certain kind of quiet you only hear when two species realize they've both been wrong, one in assuming superiority, the other in assuming separation. The matriarch held her cubs, trembling, whispering, hissing something ancient into their fur. Then, in full view of her army, she turned to the human and bowed. For a moment, the wind stopped. The stars seemed to pause in their tracks, and the human, uncertain what protocol said about galactic bows from apex predators, gave the only response that felt right. He nodded, slow, and offered another ration bar. This wasn't peace forged in treaty rooms or brokered over comms. It was made in the field, in the dirt, between a soldier and two orphans who didn't know better than to trust a stranger. It was a bond not of blood, but of action, and the galaxy would never be the same again. What came next wasn't battle, it was ceremony. The massive war fleet, previously silent and foreboding, shimmered as communications flared across bands that human satellites couldn't decipher. And yet, strangely, the human's field translator clicked on as if something had changed in the universal syntax. The matriarch stood, towering above the soldier, and said something so simple it shouldn't have been historic. You did not conquer, you cared. And that is stronger. The soldier didn't respond right away. He was watching the cubs again, now nuzzling her legs and looking back at him with eyes that asked, "Will you stay?" He knelt, one hand brushing the smallest shoulder. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. "But maybe that's why it matters." Fleet commanders aboard the mothership were stunned. The matriarch had broadcast her message across every deck: "Stand down." What followed were orders not for war, but for witness. And those ships, armed to the teeth, began powering down, one by one. What stunned the analysts most, those watching from black sites and bunkers, wasn't just that the invasion had stopped. It was that the Predator fleet hadn't just accepted the soldiers' act of kindness. They'd honored it, broadcast it, immortalized it. And in that moment, across hundreds of systems, a message was sent: the humans feed their strays. They protect the lost. Be careful who you threaten, because one might stand between you and your own. That line would later be etched into the pillars of Accord in 300 dialects. But on that day, the soldier just scratched the cub's head and asked if there was any decent coffee aboard their ship. Behind the quiet smile and disheveled hair, galactic history had already shifted. They didn't want to let him leave. The cubs, Zex and Laara, now clinging to his boots like they'd known him their whole short lives, whined and stared up with wide, unblinking eyes. He was used to comrades, command structures, missions. But he wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility, the emotional weight of being someone's entire world. The matriarch had issued her decree. Across every vessel of the Yuthari fleet, the guns powered down, the drones stopped scanning, and the war beacons dimmed. In their place, banners emerged, digital, flickering, each one bearing a single sigil, the claw print of an apex predator overlapping a human palm. And yet, not everyone aboard the 7,000 ships agreed. There were factions. Inside the flagship, behind layers of security, a council of older Yuthari generals hissed and murmured their disdain. "This species feeds weakness," one snarled. "He should have been dissected, not decorated." Another clicked his mandibles. "He corrupted the young." The cubs bonded to him, unnatural, dangerous. But politics moved slower than emotion. The matriarch had already sent an ambassadorial capsule to Earth's orbital relay station. Onboard footage of the soldier feeding the cubs their nuzzles, their whimpers, the simple way he handed over his ration bar like it was nothing. That footage wasn't tactical, it was cultural detonation. By the time Earth received it, it had already gone viral on 10 worlds. The soldier had no idea. What he did know was that he couldn't shake the cubs. He tried, told them to stay aboard, promised he'd return. But when he stepped onto the exit ramp, they followed, each step more hesitant than the last, until finally they stopped and just howled. It wasn't loud, but it cut through him like shrapnel. He turned around. "I'll stay one more night," he whispered. Inside the fleet, monitors flickered. Officers paused. Thousands of Yuthari soldiers bred for violence, conquest, precision, watched the human sit on the floor of a cruiser with 2 cubs in his lap, quietly telling stories about Earth bears and human campfires. What they didn't expect, though, was who else had been watching. A transmission intercepted the footage, scrambled through stealth algorithms and bounced through quantum relays. A third party. Not human, not Yuthari, and not friendly. The Koran Consortium, scavengers of war zones and masters of technological piracy, had seen the Yuthari power down their fleets, and where one apex fell, they always swarmed. 3 hours later, alarms blared. Koran dropships appeared in low orbit, small, fast, deadly. Not nearly as organized as the Yuthari, but desperate, hungry, and unafraid of picking through weakened prey. The soldier stood on the hangar bay when he felt the rumble, then the warning sirens. He turned to the matriarch, who was already in motion, issuing orders. But something was wrong. The cubs were gone. In the chaos, they had slipped away, and no one, not even the commander of the 7th Fleet, could track them. He didn't hesitate, didn't wait for permission. The human just grabbed his gear, loaded a plasma rifle, and ran. What he didn't know was that a shadow was watching him. One even older than the Yuthari. In the Koran dropships, one operator paused the battle plan. "What's that?" another asked. "A lone human." The first one tilted his head. "No, that's something worse. Because humans, when they've made a promise, don't need orders. They become the orders." It took him 9 minutes to find their trail. The cubs had left small signs, scorched prints, marks on the wall, one single stuffed relic of Earth clutched in a claw mark, half burnt. The Koran strike force was already inside. Not to attack, to extract the cubs. They wanted them alive. They wanted to dissect the bond, to use it, weaponize it. And the soldier, he was done with diplomacy. He entered low, quiet, crouching through metal corridors, lit only by flickering red. The rifle stayed tight to his chest. His jaw locked. When the first Koran scout turned the corner, it barely had time to open its maw before a silent burst ended its warpath. He didn't stop, just whispered, "You picked the wrong orphans." What happened next would be recorded by every ship within range. The footage, again, would go viral. The soldier moved like a ghost, quiet but terrifying. Every target calculated, every step laced with urgency. He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He simply moved with a predator's precision and the same deadly focus of someone who'd known the pain of losing someone before. And then, he heard it. A whimper. Not fear, recognition. They were close. He pushed forward, dropped 2 more scavengers, and finally saw them, trapped in a containment cage, surrounded by scanners and probes. The smallest cub had bruises. The other one snarled and shielded its sibling with a trembling body. The soldier didn't wait. One explosive charge later, the room erupted in sparks. He stepped through the fire. To the cubs, he was everything. He was home. He scooped them both up, whispered, "You're safe," and turned to leave. Behind him, the containment field collapsed, causing a chain reaction. The entire strike team lost comms. The Corin scrambled, but it was too late, because every fleet orbiting above had seen it, and none of them were willing to risk waking what they now called the Earthblood. The cubs were shaking in his arms, but they weren't crying anymore. They knew they were safe now. Not because the enemy was gone, not because the ship was secure, but because of him. This one human, their soldier, their protector. He walked through the smoke and wreckage of the Corin vessel like a storm made flesh, silent, focused, and unstoppable. Behind him, fire chewed through corrupted walls. Above him, Yuthari cruisers realigned in defense formation. And within moments of his emergence back onto the central deck, something unimaginable happened. The cubs, covered in soot, blood, and fear, raised their claws toward the surveillance drones, clutched the soldier tighter, and then spoke, not in Yuthari, not in clicks, but in broken, simple Earth standard. No hurt, human good. Across all ships, the footage halted time. Battle-hardened Yuthari warriors froze. Ambassadors wept, and matriarchs knelt in silence. It was not just a rescue, it was a declaration of allegiance from a generation not yet corrupted by war. For the Yuthari, there had never been a word for adoption, not culturally, not politically, but this changed everything. What no one expected, though, was what the human did next. He dropped his weapons, literally. His rifle, sidearm, and armor plating fell to the floor with heavy clangs, not in surrender, but in signal. He stepped forward, bare-chested, hands raised, and looked directly into the primary drone feed. The entire fleet was watching. So was Earth. So were the Corin, scattered, and now panicking as diplomatic channels exploded with ceasefire requests. The human spoke. "We don't come to conquer. We don't come to kneel. We feed the hungry, defend the innocent, and yes, we snarl back." Silence. Then uproar. But not in chaos. Applause. Yuthari, one by one, slammed their forearms to their chests in salute. A gesture stolen from the human's own prior footage. It caught like wildfire. Soon, all 7,000 ships lit up with synchronized signals. Peace. Protection. A new alliance. Still shirtless, the soldier finally allowed himself to breathe. He looked down at the cubs in his arms, and that's when a deep hum rumbled through the core of the flagship. Something older than the Yuthari, something ancient. It was the emergent one, the last living being from the first empire that had once ruled the star lanes. A being so old it hadn't moved from its chamber in 1,000 years, until now. The emergent one arrived, surrounded by energy fields and a chorus of translators. It stared down at the human, curious. Then it extended a single appendage. The last time someone gave without seeking tribute, it said, "We began a golden age. Do you seek reward?" The human blinked. "I seek a nap, laughter, actual laughter, from something that hadn't felt anything in centuries." And just like that, the new alliance wasn't sealed in blood or oaths. It was sealed in humor, in humility, in humanity. Weeks later, back on Earth, a parade was held. Not for victory, but for the first act of peace that rewrote interstellar law. The soldier didn't attend. He was too busy at the new Yuthari embassy, teaching cubs how to roast marshmallows over plasma fire. In orbit, Earth's defense network got a small permanent addition, 3 ships from the Yuthari's royal fleet, now assigned to Earth's protection detail. The matriarch personally requested it. The Corin, they vanished, not from fear, from shame. Their culture couldn't grasp why a lone human would throw away advantage to protect something smaller. They called it madness. Everyone else called it humanity. And the cubs, They grew up fluent in two languages, Euthari and sarcasm. Earth culture seeped into their bones. One became a diplomat, the other, a chef, but both, every time, introduced themselves not as soldiers or as Euthari, but as children of the Earthblood, and if you ever asked what that meant, they'd smile and offer you half of their lunch, just like he did.